Hey all, very quickly but very important before we get into this video. As usual with this series of videos, standard procedure is to jump into the cockpit and explain how everything works in the second half of the actual video. In some rare circumstances, like with this very one or the MiG-15 from some time ago, this is not possible due to health and safety policies, specifically concerning radiation being emitted from the instrument gauges, or conservational concerns, or any other reasons there might be for the cockpit to remain locked off. My fault for not prefacing it on that MiG-15 video from some weeks ago. I realized some people did get confused. Apologies for this. As a rule, Inside the Cockpit does feature the cockpit either in the episode or as part 2 in the longer ones, like with the ME-262, and it will continue to do so unless circumstances dictate otherwise. Personally, for me, if concerns exist on the side of the museum or the owners, that is perfectly reasonable. We want these machines to be in good condition, and we want them to be in good condition for as long as possible so that also future generations can enjoy them. So if it does happen again in the future, just be aware that exceptions can occur, and yes, it is my bad for not preferencing it on that MiG-15 video, but I do actually aim to reshoot specific cockpits that are missing sometimes in the future when and where possible. So just as a heads up, now you know, and if you ever see somebody being confused about this in the comment section, please just kindly remind them or tell them that this might be a reason why that cockpit scene is missing in that specific video. But as I said, I do aim to actually retake those when and where possible. So as always, I hope you guys enjoy this video, and thanks very much for listening, and here we go. Today we're looking at a North American classic, but with a twist. Now it took what the original design gave it, but with a few changes made sure that this was indeed the sharpest saber in the sky, the Canadair CL-13. Hello everyone and welcome back to Military Aviation History. I am your host Bismarck, and today we are in Berlin-Gatow in the Militärhistorische Museum of the Bundeswehr. Today's feature is on the CL-13B or Canadair Sabre Mark VI. Although from outward experience extremely similar to the North American F-86 Sabre, this aircraft has quite a unique story in itself. The F-86 Sabre is, of course, one of those iconic jets from the late 1940s and early 1950s. Together with the MiG-15, it epitomizes our perception of jets, air combat, and the leaps and bounds made in aircraft performance during that time. We are going to have a complete look at the F-86 sometime in the future, but today we will focus on this particular offshot, the CL-13. As the Canadair name implies, the origin of this aircraft is obvious, eh? In 1949, Canada became a founding member of NATO. Being a member of NATO means, of course, that you have certain obligations, at least on paper, and at this point in time, with the Cold War heating up, these obligations were in fact taken serious. As such, the Royal Canadian Air Force needed to expand. For this, it chose to go with the F-86 Sabre, which was the most modern aircraft available in the West at the time. An agreement with North American was reached via Canadair Limited of Montreal, which would complete the airframes from the sent part kits in a $1 million license contract. Initially, most parts came from the US, but by the end of the first 100 aircraft, 85% of the parts were produced in Canada. The cooperation seemed to have been actually quite a quaint one, with drawings and even engineers being exchanged. The designation of the Canadian Sabres changes somewhat from the US-American system. Instead of using letters such as A, B, E, F or K, the British system was adopted. As such, the first Canadian Sabre was known as the CL-13 Sabre Mark I. This Mark I was a copy of the F-86A5, an early production version of the original aircraft. Only one was built for the purpose of flight testing, and Canada actually got its first pilot, A.J. Lilly, to go beyond the speed of sound from these trials. The Sabre Mark II appeared in 1951, based on the E-type F-86. A reasonable domestic production of 350 aircraft was the result, and in 52 and 53, just under 440 Mark IVs followed. Now the Mark II and the Mark IV differentiated only in a few regards, mainly to changes with the cockpit instruments, the cockpit pressurization and the canopy release, which could now be released manually without actually triggering the ejection seat the pilot was using. A mid-production change also resulted in the elevator trim actuator being moved further backwards towards the tail. But as you can see, the initial difference between the US American and the Commonwealth Sabres was really minor, and once they were in the sky, you could only really make out the difference by what accent the pilot spoke. The first Mark IIs were soon sent across the Atlantic to be based in the United Kingdom, then France, and finally West Germany. In fact, Canada had more Sabres abroad than at home around this point in time, and even ended up jumping in to cover US shortages during the Korean War by delivering 60 Mark IIs to their neighbors. These were given special designations such as F-86 Story is kind of coming full circle at this point in time. But for Britain too, the Canadair Sabre was helpful to fill a gap within the Royal Air Force, which had yet to introduce a swept-wing fighter, and it stayed in service until the Hawker Hunter rolls out in mid-1950. In combat trials against the Meteor, the Sabre had already proven superior, and time was of the essence, as in the words of the British Chief of Air Staff Sir John Slessor, it would otherwise be 2 more years until the RAF could be equipped with a type not outclassed by the Soviet MiG-15. So although there was political and bureaucratic headaches aplenty, it was a done deal. At this point in time, the aircraft was also then transferred to other nations such as Italy, Greece, Turkey or Yugoslavia, which was one of those odd countries that, like Finland, like to do things differently. They had actually received the first batch for free under the military assistance program by Britain, MAP in short. But when Yugoslavia started warming up to the Soviet Union once more, these deliveries were stopped. Instead, Britain now made Yugoslavia pay 5,000 to 15,000 USD per aircraft. Adjusted for inflation, that's like a maximum of 140,000 US dollars in 2019 money. Bargain of a lifetime, really, if you ask me. Until this point, the Canadair Sabre suggests itself to be little less than a Sabre half-brother, but this soon changed with the Mark V and VI. Canada had initially thought about substituting the original General Electric engine of the Sabre with a homegrown design, specifically the Avro Orenda, giving it an extra 800 pounds of thrust. Together with North American, they had actually initiated the NA-167 project to test the installation and proceeded with testing the aircraft and the Orenda in the late 1950s on the thus far unmentioned Mark III. Only one was built with a slight modification to allow the bulkier Orenda to fit. American aviator Jacqueline Cochran actually used this aircraft to set 2 consecutive women's speed records in '53, and she became the first woman to crack the speed of sound with that aircraft. The tests were thus promising, but because the Orenda required a complete redesign, well, not a complete, but a significant redesign, and a new production and logistical support line, the General Electric engines were preferred. This changed, of course, when the Orenda 10 appeared, because by now the aircraft was about to gain 1,200 pounds of extra thrust, which was reason enough to start pumping out CL-13As, Mark Vs. The performance increase was significant. For example, depending on the altitude the aircraft was flying at, it climbed nearly double as fast as the old Mark II. Based on trials with the Mark IV, the Mark V was also given wind fences, just like the later North American Sabres. This was a good thing too, as the deletion of the slats on the leading edges had made stalling characteristics of the Sabre less forgiving. In April '54, over 1,000 CL-13s had been built, courtesy of the new production line of Mark Vs, 370 of those. Now, being in Germany, it serves mentioning that the CL-13 Mark V is of special significance to this country. Alongside American Sabres, 75 Mark Vs made up part of the newly rearmed West German Luftwaffe. As overhauled hand-me-downs, they were in fact given to West Germany as a gift. While the Mark V was good, Canadair wasn't finished yet. Pushing out the CL-13B or Mark VI, it eventually developed the zenith of Sabre performance. Incorporating this 2-stage Orenda 14, the aircraft suddenly jumped to 7,300 pounds of thrust. Although it was also heavier, the speed increase was marked. The slats were also put back on the wings where they belonged. Now 655 would eventually be built. Among these were 319 for Canada and 225 for West Germany. The Luftwaffe developed and operated these in Jagdgeschwader 71, 72 and 73 until the mid-1960s, although some were in fact retained for training and target towing duties until the 1980s. Total production of the CL-13 as a whole stood just shy of 2,000 machines. And perhaps running with their success, a whole other string of variants was planned. The CL-13C and J, both with afterburners, the D with a rocket motor, the G as a two-seat trainer, and the H with radar. They remained paper projects, however. What wasn't a paper project was another purpose-built Commonwealth Sabre for Australia. Now this story goes back to the 1950s. These aircraft were notably using a Rolls-Royce Avon engine or so and using two 30mm Aden guns. And they were known as the CAC Sabre or CA-27s. And again, in the future I hope to cover those. I just have to make it to Australia first. Even the CL-13B, standing as the peak performer amongst all Sabres, could not hold its own against the new up-and-coming breed of fighter jets. However, attempts were made in West Germany to at least modernize available stock and keep it competitive for as long as it was possible. For example, instead of North American T-14E ejection seats, Mark V Martin Bakers were installed, and AM-9 sidewinders, one per wing, were added. In West Germany, however, and elsewhere, this was not enough. Germany and Canada both embraced the F-104 Starfighter. While some had hoped to retain the Mark VI as a fighter bomber, the introduction of the Fiat G91 provided a more dedicated and modern platform for that. The CL-13B was a single-seat, single-engine fighter jet. This aircraft is 11.4 meters long, spans 11.3 meters and stands at 4.5 meters. It is powered by a single Avro Orenda 14 with a maximum thrust just shy of 7,300 pounds, giving the maximum speed of 1,140 kilometers an hour. Empty weight is around 10,000 pounds with maximum loaded weight of 17,000 pounds. The aircraft is armed with 6 50-cal M3 machine guns, each holding 300 rounds. Although very American, this armament eventually turned out to be too light in jet combat, and subsequent aircraft in the late 1950s and 60s changed to cannons. So what we'll do now is a little bit of a pre-flight check, just as the pilot would do before taking off in his Mark VI. So we'll come up to the aircraft, just general inspection, is everything fine? Make sure that the covers up top are latched. We have the cover, of course, here. We can twist that off, take it away. We check the gear, just normal stuff, tire pressure, nothing looks deflated, no leaks, no obvious damage. Obviously the landing light here is deployed. That would retract once we give the command from inside the cockpit, but we want that obviously out for now. Just general reference of the aircraft, everything is nicely latched and stored in place, that's fine. So we move along the wing again, just making sure that everything is fine. We've got a couple of latches up here, drop tank connector, rocket jettison and so on. Just make sure that those are properly fastened. Same thing goes for the wing tank opening there. As we have a drop tank, we also want to make sure that it is properly installed. This is not because we don't trust the ground crew, but hey, you always want to have a second eye, and you're actually the one taking it off in the sky, so you want to make sure everything is connected properly. We move on, check the boundary layer, fence right here, check the pitot tube, take off the cover if need be, then check the navigational light, nothing's obstructing that, great. Now we have to duck under it because we can't pass due to the MiG that's on the other side. Looking at the wing from the back, we make sure that we have proper movement in the aileron. We make sure that nothing is obstructing the flaps. As you can see, there's actually a flap guard installed here. We obviously would be taking that off at this point. Once again, quick visual check, quick reference. You can even just rattle on it a little bit to see if everything's properly latched. I'm not obviously going to do that because it's a museum right now. We want to check this wheel as well, this gear, making sure there is no visual damage, there's no leak, the tire pressure is proper. Going up again, making sure everything is properly fastened, everything works fine, excellent. Then we come to the air brake, and as you can see here, actually the air brake is slightly open. It's just ajar, and this could easily just pass the visual inspection of somebody on the ground. Obviously they do their job as well, but you never want to just take their word for it. So that obviously has to be checked. We come to the engine outlet, just quick check that it's free. We check that nothing is blocking the rudder. We don't really have access to it from here. Just make sure also the elevators are working. Come around, quick visual check here. Another air brake, make sure the hydraulics latches are in place. Again, this should really be closed for us to take off. In another couple of latches, make sure everything is fine. Another inspection of the port flap and of the port aileron, as well as the gear that we have here and the drop tank. Now we have to duck under the wing at this moment because of the Hawk AA system right here, but we come around and we have another inspection of the navigational light right here. Moving along the leading edge, boundary fence once again looks fine. Drop tank, yeah, that looks properly installed. And we move along, quick visual inspection as well. And we come up in the front. Now, usually at this point there would still be covers for the muzzles of the three M350 cals on either side. Those can either be taken off at this point, but usually that would be something the ground crew would do just before takeoff. As we stand here, we're pretty much ready to go inside the cockpit, start our pre-flight from in there, and then take this aircraft into the sky. The list of countries using the Canadair Sabre spans quite a few, all the way from Australia, Greece, Indonesia, Pakistan and Yugoslavia. It took what North American had given, the F-86, an excellent machine in its own right, and edged it just that much further, creating what is, at least on paper, the most powerful Sabre out there. While it is true that jet development soon moved beyond what this machine would provide, this aircraft still gave many nations a fantastic fighter platform, and one, in the case of West Germany, that allowed the country to fundamentally rebuild its air force from. So I hope that you enjoyed today's episode, and if you did, please consider supporting us on Patreon to help fund more content like this, and you will also get exclusive access to behind-the-scenes footage from these machines and shoots. And I also want to thank the Militärhistorische Museum here in Berlin-Gatow for allowing us to get close with their exhibit. If you want to visit it, link is down in the description below. And as always, I hope you guys have a great day, good hunting, and see you in the sky. Feel free to click on any of these. They're all good videos, I think.